Hi everyone, my name's Louise and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I run the Life with Scoliosis blog and YouTube channel where I talk about my life and experiences of living with scoliosis. So what I wanted to do for this video is talk about my own scoliosis story. I make a lot of videos about scoliosis in general, but I thought as it's Scoliosis Awareness Month, I'd share a little bit about my own experiences with scoliosis and going through the surgery and what my life is like now. My scoliosis story starts when I was 14 years old. So I was diagnosed with scoliosis at 14. Prior to that, I had no other medical conditions. It came completely out of the blue. So I had never heard of scoliosis. I didn't have a clue what it was, and neither had my parents. The way it was spotted was my dad noticed that when I was walking that I was kind of tilted to one side, and I had also, up to that point, I had noticed little things that I wasn't sure what was causing them. So I noticed that I had a rib that was sticking out on one side, and I remember asking my friend when I was about 14 whether women have an extra rib because I wondered why mine was sticking out on one side, but I never really thought anything of it really. I'd also noticed that my shoulder blade was kind of sticking out on the right side, and I was finding it a bit uncomfortable when sitting in school assemblies and things like that on the plastic chairs that we used to have. So there'd been a couple of things, but I hadn't really put it all together and I didn't really know what, if anything, these things meant. But my dad noticed that my posture wasn't quite right, so we went to the doctors, and to be honest, I was expecting them to say, you know, it's fine, there's nothing wrong, but she took one look at my back and said that I needed to go for an x-ray at the hospital. She thought I had scoliosis, and to be honest, like at that point I was just in complete shock because I had never heard of scoliosis. I didn't know what it was, and I remember going to the hospital for the x-ray, and when I saw the x-ray for the first time I just burst into tears because it just looked so bad. So my scoliosis at the time of diagnosis was an S shape, and it was measured by the specialist, and they measure scoliosis in like a Cobb angle, they call it. So it's like in a degrees. A straight spine is 0 degrees, and anything over 50 degrees is considered severe, and mine was over 70 degrees. So obviously it was a big shock, and I was told that, you know, it can't be treated by bracing because it was already too severe. So the only option was to either just monitor it and make sure that it didn't get any worse, or there was an option to have spinal surgery. So obviously when I was 14, hearing that was just absolutely terrifying. So it was a massive shock to me and a massive shock to my family at the time. I know that my family, well, my mum blamed herself quite a lot when I was a teenager, that she should have spotted it earlier. But the thing is with scoliosis is it just comes out of nowhere, and you can't blame yourself. It just develops so quickly that it's very, very difficult to spot. And in my case, it developed so quickly that it's almost like, you know, one day it wasn't there and then the next day it was there. It wasn't quite like that, but it was very quick. It was a very difficult time for me, you know, being 14 years old. I isolated myself quite a lot. I stayed in my room quite a lot. I was crying a lot. I was arguing with my parents a lot. It was just a very difficult time. I kept myself covered up. I didn't tell anyone about my scoliosis. You know, my friends didn't know about it for, I'd say, a couple of years. I just kept it to myself because I was that scared. I didn't like to be different. I didn't want anybody to know about it, so I just kept it to myself. I tended to avoid activities where my back would go on show. I hated going swimming or anything like that because I just didn't want anyone to notice. So at the time, myself and my family were absolutely terrified of the surgery. So we decided to opt for a what they call watch and wait approach, where I had a yearly x-ray where my scoliosis was monitored, and that went on for about 10 years. And to be honest, it didn't change that much in that time. It maybe changed a few degrees, but it didn't change because I had finished growing when I was 14, and they told me that, and they said that it's unlikely to progress rapidly now because you finished growing. So that's why we decided on the watch and wait approach. But I did find that very difficult because I suffer with anxiety, I always have done, and having scoliosis definitely made the anxiety worse. I was very, very anxious that the scoliosis would get worse. I used to get very anxious before an appointment, before I had my x-rays, and I hated going because I just thought they're going to tell me it's got worse, and I just didn't know what to do, you know, whether to have the surgery, and I kept worrying about the future, and I kept thinking, you know, is it going to get worse in the future? And it felt like it was just hanging over me like a dark cloud. I tried to carry on with life, went off to university, I lived my life, but it was always there, like hanging over me. I was always worrying about it in the back of my mind. And I think I was lucky in the sense that it was an S curve, so, you know, unless you're a specialist of scoliosis, it kind of balanced itself out, so it wasn't that noticeable for somebody that didn't really know what they were looking for. Obviously, to myself, it was very noticeable. I hated how I looked, you know, it was just an awful time. So I remember I used to do things like take pictures of my back and, you know, get upset because I would be paranoid that it would be changing, that it would be getting worse. Looking back now, it was extreme. What I did, I used to take hundreds of photographs, and I would just be studying them for hours, like trying to work out whether it had changed, whether it had moved. And yeah, it affected my mental health like massively, definitely. So, you know, that went on for quite some time, and then when I was in my early 20s and I was at university, I started to get quite a lot more pain, especially around because my spine was shaped in an S, so the lower part of the S curve on my lower back, I used to get a lot of muscle spasms where the muscles around the curve would get all knotted up, I guess because they were trying to support the curve and the pressure, you know, from the scoliosis. So I used to get a lot of, you know, lower back muscle pain. It was bad. Nothing got rid of it. I tried pretty much everything that I could think of. So I did physio, I did acupuncture, I did swimming, massage, all sorts of things. Painkillers didn't work. Nothing seemed to work, and even like things that did work, it would be temporary. So I'd have a massage, it would like feel alright for a while, and then a few days later it would come back again. So it got me down that I was getting that amount of pain at that age. So when I was 24, I decided to have the scoliosis surgery, which is older than a lot of people. I know a lot of people that have it done are teenagers. Because of that, my experiences are obviously going to be different to people that have the surgery when they're a teenager, because obviously the younger you are, the quicker that you're more likely to recover. So as part of my scoliosis surgery, my spine was fused from T3 to L3, which is pretty much the whole spine. I've got 3 discs at the bottom of my spine that are not fused, and that enables me to bend from the waist. So I can bend like that from the side, but the rest of my spine won't bend now because it's fused. In my case, I managed to get a moderate correction of my scoliosis, so it wasn't, because my scoliosis was so severe, they couldn't straighten the spine completely because it wasn't safe. They do spinal cord monitoring during surgery, so to make sure that they don't over straighten the spine. In my case, I was told that my spine was stiff and they couldn't straighten it fully, so I still have scoliosis, although obviously it's a lot milder than it was, and it's fused, so now it can't get any worse. I think what a lot of people don't always talk about is post-surgery depression and post-surgery blues. So I went through massive depression following the surgery because I had it in my head that once I'd had surgery I'd be fixed, I'd be cured, and I could just go on and live with my life. But I think it took a lot of acceptance when I first found out that obviously my scoliosis wasn't corrected 100%. I still had scoliosis and this is how I would always be, and that took a lot of getting my head around and accepting that that would be the case, and it was quite difficult. So there's a period of, I would say, a year maybe following surgery where I was very down about it. I was in a lot of pain. I wasn't necessarily happy with the correction, although I am now, but it was just at the time I was not happy because I thought, well, it was going to be straight. When I started to accept that, you know, I'd had a decent correction, I was lucky to get through the surgery, and I started to move forward and create my blog. Felt a lot happier about it, but it's just something that is not always talked about. Just the feeling of, you know, after the surgery, of feeling down and feeling depressed, it can be quite difficult. It took me a lot longer to recover than what I thought it would. It took me, I would say, about 8 months or so. I remember it was about 8 months after when I started to go back to the gym again. And I was only doing things like walking on the treadmill, like really slowly, but I started to do more around 8 months. And I'd say it was like well over a year when I started to actually do more things again, like what I did before. So it was well over a year. So it's a very long recovery. And I'd say it was probably like the hardest thing that I've ever been through. So now I'm around 12 years post-op. I'd say the first year after surgery was tough and I was in a lot of pain and I was recovering. After I'd recovered, the pain was a lot better. It was a lot better than what it was before surgery. I didn't have the muscle spasms anymore, so they completely went post-surgery. What I did find, and what I do find now, is I do get quite a lot of lower back pain. It's mainly when I've been in one position for a long time, whether that's standing in the same position, sitting in the same position, or just walking around all day. I get quite a lot of lower back pain, but when I sit down or lie down, it tends to ease off. I feel fortunate, you know, I don't take painkillers anymore, so it's not at that level where I need painkillers. So the pain I have now, for me, is a lot better than it was before surgery, but I know that's not always the case. I tend to do most things now. There's a lot of things that I've done post-surgery, post-recovery, that I never thought I would be able to do. For example, I've recently ran a marathon. If someone told me when I was 14 years old, you know, when I was really upset after being diagnosed with scoliosis, that in the future you'll run a marathon, I just wouldn't have believed it. So if you're watching this and you've recently been diagnosed with scoliosis, or you're going through the recovery from surgery or anything like that, then hopefully this will give you a bit of hope. It's amazing what the human body can be capable of. I'm really proud that I managed to do that, and I've done lots of other things as well. Like I've raised money for Scoliosis Association UK by doing a trek on the Great Wall of China. I've done lots of half marathons, I've climbed lots of mountains. Next year I'm planning on doing a trek to Machu Picchu to raise money for the Scoliosis Association UK. So all I would say is, you know, I feel like scoliosis shouldn't have to hold you back. It hasn't held me back. When you first diagnose, it's a shock and you think, you're like, well, I thought that's it, my life's over, I'm not going to be able to do anything. Whilst yes, I do get pain, I'm very fortunate to not be in the position where it stops me from doing things. Whether that will be the case in the future, I don't know, but I'm going to try and do as much as I can while I can. And also another thing is that I started my blog and this YouTube channel to talk about scoliosis and to try and raise awareness, to try and help other people in the same situation that I was in when I was first diagnosed, because I was just completely lost. And you know, back then there wasn't you know, social media, there wasn't things like this where you can actually find information out. You know, I felt very alone, and I just don't want other people to feel like that, and that's why I made this channel and my blog. And you know, I've kind of turned a negative situation into a positive situation, and I try my best to help and inspire other people as much as I can. So that's just a bit about my scoliosis story. I've probably left things out, but if you've got any questions for me, please leave a comment below. And if you're interested in hearing more about my life with scoliosis, my experiences with scoliosis, and my adventures that are coming up, like my Machu Picchu trek, then please subscribe for regular scoliosis related content. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.